Chapters 20, 21, and 22. Eric, Eric, and Eric. Mr. Kidswatter's voice crackled over the loudspeaker. "Mrs. Jules, send Eric to my office at once." He sounded mad. Mrs. Jules was confused. "When did we get a loudspeaker?" she asked. "Louis put it in yesterday," said Jenny. Mrs. Jules was still confused. There were 3 Erics in her class. She didn't know which one Mr. Kidswatter meant. Eric Fry was fat, but not short. Eric Bacon was short, but not fat. Eric Ovens was short and fat. Mrs. Jules chose the biggest Eric. "Eric Fry, Mr. Kidswatter wants to see you." Eric Fry trembled as he slowly stood up. The other 2 Erics smiled. The principal's office was on the 1st floor. "It's not fair," Eric thought as he headed down to his doom. "Anytime any Eric does something wrong, I'm the one who gets in trouble." He stood in front of the principal's door. His heart beat very fast. He took a couple of breaths, then knocked lightly. "Enter!" boomed Mr. Kidswatter. Eric turned the doorknob. He took 1 step inside, then stood with his back against the wall, as far away from Mr. Kidswatter as he could get. Mr. Kidswatter sat behind an enormous desk. He wore mirrored sunglasses, so Eric couldn't see where he was looking. "Sit down, Eric," he said. Eric moved to the small metal chair in front of his desk. A bare light bulb hung over his head. Mr. Kidswatter cracked his knuckles. "We can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way," he said. "It's your choice." "I don't know what you're talking about," said Eric. "I didn't do anything." "So, it's the hard way, is it?" asked Mr. Kidswatter. "Very well. You'll talk. One way or another, you'll tell me everything I need to know. But," Mr. Kidswatter pounded his fist on his desk, "when was the last time you sharpened your pencil?" Eric tried to remember, but he was too nervous to think. Wait, let me think," he stammered. "We had spelling dictation on Friday, but I borrowed—" "Where were you yesterday afternoon at 12:15?" asked Mr. Kidswatter. "Yesterday?" asked Eric. "I was here at Wayside School. I remember I ate lunch and then I played kickball." Mr. Kidswatter smiled. "Do you kick with your left foot?" he asked. "No, I'm right-footed," said Eric Fry. "Humph," grumbled Mr. Kidswatter. "Have you ever gotten your hair cut at Charlie's barber shop?" "Yes," said Eric, 2 weeks ago." "Aha!" said Mr. Kidswatter. "So you admit it. Do you know what a mugworm griblick is?" Eric Fry turned pale. "No, please," he begged. "I didn't do it. I'm innocent. You've got the wrong Eric. There are 2 other Erics in my class." Mr. Kidswatter scowled. "So that's the way you want to play it, is it? Well, that's fine with me. I've got all the time in the world." He flicked on the microphone. "Mrs. Jules, send me another Eric." 29 floors above them, Mrs. Jules looked at the 2 remaining Erics. "Okay, Eric Ovens," she said. Eric Ovens shivered. His eyes filled with tears. "Why me?" he asked himself over and over again as he walked down the stairs. "It's my parents' fault. Why did they have to name me Eric? Why couldn't they name me Osgood?" He tapped on the door to the principal's office. "Come in," bellowed Mr. Kidswatter. Eric Ovens gulped, then walked inside. He sat in the little chair in front of Mr. Kidswatter's enormous desk. Eric Fry was nowhere to be seen. "What happened to Eric Fry?" he asked. "I'll ask the questions," barked Mr. Kidswatter. "But don't worry, Eric," he said gently. "You have nothing to fear, so long as you tell the truth." He cracked his knuckles. Eric Ovens was very scared. Mrs. Jules always said that there was more than one answer to every question. He hoped he gave Mr. Kidswatter the right ones. "Did you have spelling dictation last Friday?" Mr. Kidswatter asked. "Yes," said Eric Ovens. "How did you know that?" I have my ways, Mr. Kidswatter said slyly behind his mirrored glasses. When was the last time you sharpened your pencil? This morning, said Eric Ovens. Mauricia accidentally stepped on it and... Did you play kickball yesterday at 12:15? No, I played tetherball. Right or left-handed? Right. Mr. Kidswatter threw a stapler at him. Eric caught it with his right hand. Mr. Kidswatter scowled. Okay, Eric, tell me this. Have you ever gotten your hair cut at Charlie's barber shop? No, but I will. I'll go there right now if you want. You're not going anywhere, shouted Mr. Kidswatter. Have you ever heard of a mugworm griblick? Eric Ovens screamed. Upstairs, Mrs. Jules heard Mr. Kidswatter's voice resound on the loudspeaker. Mrs. Jules, send me the last Eric. On my way, said Eric Bacon. He hopped out of his chair and bounced down the stairs. He didn't bother knocking on Mr. Kidswatter's door. He just walked right in. What can I do for you? He asked. There was no sign of Eric Ovens. Have a seat, said Mr. Kidswatter. I just want to ask you a few questions. Sure thing, said Eric Bacon. He sat in the little chair. He leaned back with his hands behind his head and his feet up on Mr. Kidswatter's desk. He looked at himself in Mr. Kidswatter's mirrored glasses, took a comb out of his back pocket, and combed his hair. His hair was very neat and trim. He had gotten it cut yesterday at 12:15 at Charlie's barber shop. Mr. Kidswatter cracked his knuckles. When's the last time you sharpened your pencil? He asked. November 11th, Eric Bacon answered right away. It was 3 minutes before 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I remember because my watch stopped. Where were you yesterday at 12:15? I was in the garden having tea. Did Mauricia step on somebody's pencil this morning? Asked Mr. Kidswatter. Yes. Whose? She stepped on everybody's pencil, said Eric Bacon. Are you left-handed or right-footed? Demanded Mr. Kidswatter. I write with my left foot and I kick with my right hand, replied Eric Bacon. Mr. Kidswatter scowled. Have you ever gotten your hair cut at Charlie's barber shop? No, I never get my hair cut, said Eric Bacon. I'm bald. This is a wig. Mr. Kidswatter took off his glasses and glared at him. Do the words mugworm griblick mean anything to you? Eric Bacon shook his head. I can look it up in the dictionary if you want. Mr. Kidswatter shook his head. I tried that, he said. It's not there. He rubbed his chin. Okay, boys, you can come out now. Eric Ovens and Eric Fry crawled out from under his desk. Mr. Kidswatter looked at each Eric. One of you is lying, he said. I don't know who it is, but I'll find out. And when I do, whoever it is will be very sorry. Now I'll give you one last chance to come clean. Eric Fry trembled. Eric Ovens shivered. Come on, let's blow this popsicle stand, said Eric Bacon. He walked out of the room. The other two Erics followed. Mr. Kidswatter rubbed the back of his neck. He looked at the white card on top of his desk. On one side, it said, Charlie's Barber Shop. Under that, in blue ink, it said, Eric, Tuesday, 12:15. He turned the card over. On the other side, a left-handed person had written with a sharp pencil, Mr. Kidswatter is a mugworm griblick.